Hi, and welcome to the Part 1 in-depth session of Clear Biz. We're going to be looking at business clients, and then tasks, and then personal clients in that order. And for a specific reason, because things seem to flow that way a little bit better in the program. When we begin, we're going to start off at the business client section and work our way through a lot of different sections of the program itself. So to start off, with business clients, what we're going to see when we first open the program is basically what you're looking at. So you're going to see that the handshake icon on the left-hand side is highlighted by default. That handshake icon appears in what we consider to be the dashboard of the program because it allows you to navigate through different sections and do different things within each part of the program. With that handshake icon highlighted, what it will do is it will show you the main information for the client you're currently looking at. It'll also show you the default contact for this particular company here on the right-hand side. And when we look at putting more than one contact on a company's detail, you'll see here that there's a picture of two little people in the blue area. And what it allows you to do is you can drop down the names of any other contacts you may have on here, so you can temporarily switch from whoever the default contact is to a different person's name so you can see their name and information without changing who the default contact is for the company. Just above this, you have some checkboxes here which you can list what services you may or may not provide for this particular client. When you select these items, they don't physically schedule anything in the program. They're just information. When you click one of them the first time, you'll get a black check mark. If you click it a second time, it'll turn it gray. And a third click will clear it out. Those colors don't have any default meaning in the program, but what you could do as an example is we could use a black check mark to show a service we currently do for this client. We could then show a gray check mark as a service of which we would like to provide for this client so that we can show how we're trying to gain more revenue from them in future. Also, we tend to get this question a lot, but as you can see, there's an ability to customize the names of these items. So we just wanted to point out that while you can change the names of these items, if you do change them, they're not going to modify any of the task tabs you see at the top of the software. If you're ever looking for client information, the best search function you can find is using the Find Client button here on the left. Looks like a pair of binoculars. In here you'll find there are two different search methods. The first of which assumes you know the name of the client you're looking for. So as you type out the name, it will try to predictively figure out the rest of it for you. In the event that you don't have the name of the client you're looking for, the secondary search field allows you to do just that. Now the next tab in is called Personnel. This allows you to add all the different people that are associated with this company. So if you'd like to, you can add this office's entire staff to the list. When you'd like to add somebody to the list, what you're going to do is type their name in the personnel field. And then you're going to click the Add button. I'm going to edit Sarah's to show you what that window will look like. Now if you've only typed in two names within here, it'll separate the names as first and then last. If you type in three names within here, it'll separate them as first, then middle, then last. If Sarah here is only a part of this company, and I don't need her anywhere else in the program, then the only thing that matters to me is the information found in the Business Info tab, because that is the information that's going to show in the contact window on the right-hand side of the program. You can see, though, that you can fill out her personal info, spouse info, family members, and any other notes you may want to leave in her file. And the reason why this is here is because while she may not be a tax client of mine at the moment, she may become one in future. And if that ever happens, if I've already got her detail filled out from here, then I don't have to go and retype it all in the personal client section. What I can do is at any time, whether I'm doing this as I'm adding her to the company for the first time or later on, I want to edit this, I can go back to where her name is, and under personal tax status, you'll want to click the checkbox here to fill it out. Then when you do and you click OK, it'll take a copy of Sarah's information and place it into the personal client section for me. So I don't have to spend any time retyping her detail, and also because it's copied from her original file, it means that in future, if ever I go and update her phone number from either portion of the program, it'll be updated in both locations at the same time. The default contact is whoever has the green check mark beside their name, and you can move that at any time you want by clicking beside anybody else's name in that list. The next tab over is 6 fields of information that you can utilize for anything that may be relevant to these titles. And if you do use it, just like lawyer information here, it will appear on the client's file itself. Once again, though, you don't have to use these fields if you don't want to. Now lastly, in the other tab, there are actually 5 customizable fields that you can utilize to put information that shows in a client's file for anything that maybe we didn't have a default location for. So what we mean by that is we have gone previously in my example here and clicked Define Custom Fields. So this Define Custom Fields button allows me to change the names of these fields, which will change it for all business clients. And you will find that personal clients have their own set of 5 separate from these. So if I go and I change this, let's say I change it to bin number for my example, which I've already done. What this is saying is that I have a filing cabinet in my office which contains hard copy client information. And those copies are associated to my clients by a particular number of some sort. So instead of keeping that information in a lengthy Excel spreadsheet or an outdated Rolodex system, this may be a little more efficient because now you can see that the bin number shows on the client's file. So if I run a search for their name, I'll see it right away and I'll know exactly what I'm looking for. And this may be a little faster than what you're currently using. This is also one example of, I'm sure, many different ways in which you can utilize those. So if there is something else that you want specifically showing on the client's file, this is definitely one of the places you're going to want to use it. Lastly, there is a note field here which also does show on the client's file. This particular field, however, has no limit to the amount of information you can leave in here. So as a suggestion, we tend to say to put information in here that you should always be aware of every time you look at this particular file. So for example, when you're speaking with the owner of this location, try to refrain from mentioning this kind of detail because the owner gets a little upset about it. Or further to that, when you're working on the files for this client, make sure you follow these particular steps or something will go terribly wrong. That's the kind of detail that we suggest to have in there, is upfront center information. Now there is a secondary note location that you can utilize called the Scratchpad in the upper right hand portion. And just like the note field, this too has no limit to what you can put in here. The difference being is whatever you leave in the Scratchpad only shows up when you open the Scratchpad to view what's inside it. So because of that, we suggest to leave an information in here that is maybe nice to have on file, but is not incredibly important detail, things that you may not need to look up too frequently, because you don't see it until you actually open the Scratchpad. Neither of those two locations are where we would log things like when they called about something, or if they've dropped off a document, or if you made an agreement. We actually have a different location for that. So that section is actually called the More Info tab. And you can see within here, there are 2 different sections allowing you to do 2 different kinds of things. The upper half is strictly for logging things like missing information that needs to be located or questions that need an answer. And then the lower half is to log every other kind of communication that you may or may not receive from your clients. When you first look at this, however, there will be no communication types to choose from by default. So what we want you to do is click the bubble right beside the drop-down menu, and then you can add in all of the different types that you may receive from your clients in future. So as an example here, we could put walk-in as a type. Once you have those types in your list, you can choose from them, and then you can actually create searches based on those types later on, and we'll show you how to do searching in a few minutes. Now you can see here when you click the green button for the corresponding section, it knows which client it's for. However, you can go to the bottom right of the screen, and you will see that there is a big blue circle with a question mark in it, and also a big phone icon. The blue circle is the same as the green button for the upper half. The phone icon is the lower half. But you can do these from anywhere in the program. So the only difference being is that when you click, let's say, the blue circle, because it's not right on the client's file, you have to tell it which client it's for. That is the only difference between the two. Now I'm going to quickly add another user in this section here. So we're going to go to Manage Users. Currently I'm the administrator for the program. Only the administrator can add or remove users from the system. However, I can make other administrators in the program. So let me just add Bobby. Now when you do add another user, it comes in by default as a full user. The only difference between administrator and full user is that administrators are the only people who can access this menu and add or remove users from the system. Full users cannot, but they can do everything else. So now let's say I want to leave a question on this client's file. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to switch it to question, and we're going to call this question test for example's sake. Now, if I've already left the client some sort of message, let's say I called and left a voicemail, I can say that I've notified them. Then I'll use my date stamp and I'll put left VM to exemplify that I've left a voicemail, and also then put here is what I wanted to know. And you can see when you use the date stamp, it takes today's day, year, time, and the person entering the note here. As the person leaving this question, this is really all I'm responsible for doing, so now I can click OK, and it will save this to the client's file. Because I've assigned that to Bobby's name, however, if Bobby is currently logged into the program, in the bottom right-hand portion of your screen, just above where your time appears in Windows, he'll get a pop-up that will let him know that this question was just given to him, so he'll know about it right away. If Bobby wasn't logged in at the time, however, there are two other windows which will come up if there's anything assigned to you when you first log into the program. They are these advanced forms here on the right-hand side for both the upper and lower half. And they are designed by default, especially even when you open them manually like I just did, to show you all items that have been assigned to you from here that have not yet been resolved. So these will come up when you log into the program, and they will always come up until you have run out of unresolved items. So that way you can't forget about these issues. So if Bobby wasn't in at the time that I assigned him the question, he'll see it on this window when he logs in. Now if I do a quick search for Bobby's name here, we will see the item that we've assigned to him. So Bobby's going to see this on his list, and he'll be aware that this is something he has to take care of. Now Bobby doesn't have to go to that client's file to view the detail. He can just simply scroll over to the right hand side of the question and then click on View Info to open it from here. So Bobby sees the details. Now let's say he's gotten a hold of the client and he has the question answered. So he could say, okay, I've answered your question. Now I'm still logged in as myself, so it's filling out my name, but it would fill out his name automatically. He could also say he's entered details in the system depending on what he needed to do. And then he could use the date stamp to put in when he actually filled out the question. So here is what you needed from me, whatever the event of that question may be. Once he's got it filled out, he can then make one final decision. He's either going to resolve this item, which will fill out once again the date and his name, or he's going to leave the resolve checkbox blank, fill out that he's answered it as of this day, but now because the resolve checkbox is blank, he can now reassign it back to Adam, which means it'll pop up as part of his list. So with Adam logged into the program, he'll know right away because the pop-up will come up on his screen and let him know that this question now has an answer on it. And it will be part of his items when he opens the program or calls up the advanced form manually. So he'll see this right away, and it's basically now Adam's responsibility to go into the question and resolve it when he feels it's completed. Once it's resolved, it stays in the client's file for as long as you keep them in the system. The administrators and full users can actually delete these particular entries, so those are the only people who can actually get rid of them from the system. But if you do delete the client, all of the items that you've placed in their file will also be deleted as well. So where this can also be very important is with the communications. Let's pretend that you make an agreement with your client. So you place an agreement on their file. And let's pretend that it was a 4% discount on their next invoice. Now 4 months goes by, client gets the invoice from you, and they're thinking maybe you don't remember the original agreement. So the client calls you up and says, I thought we agreed to an 8% discount. And you might be thinking, pretty sure we said 4. So what you can do now is you can say, well, hold on a second. Let's go ahead and verify this. So you head on over to the client's file, and then you run a search. You don't have to go to the client's file to run that search. You can just go to the advanced form. And you can do so actually by going to the bottom right and clicking the little circle with the notepad on it or the phone icon with the notepad. They allow you to run searches in those particular sections. So once again, we're going to click the magnifying glass. Then we're going to change the type that we want to look for. So we probably want to look for agreement. We may not care if it's resolved or not or who it was intended for in the office, but we would care about the client in question. And then you would probably care about the date in question as well. So you may call up the date range of the beginning of that week to the end of that week. And then you would run your search. So once you've got your search in here, immediately it will come up and say, okay, here is the agreements that you placed on this client's file within that time period. So you can immediately turn around and say, we agreed to 4%. It's on your file here. And if you don't believe me, I can pop this off to Excel by clicking the Export to Excel button at the top attach it to an email, and give it to the client right away. And because you found it so fast, usually the client will go, oh, that's right, it was 4%. So as opposed to having this sort of information in a stack of paperwork and then trying to dig for that while giving the client time to argue with you, and maybe possibly just giving into their demands to get them off the phone so you can get back to your day. So this can be a very important defensive tool for you and your staff. Now, one final thing you'll notice in here, there is a list of 21 items on the left-hand side. And these 21 items have the same black and gray checkmark system we saw earlier. So first click, black, second, gray. Now, you can customize the names of these items by clicking Customize List just above them. And when you change the names, it'll change it for all business clients. These could be used for things that are constantly coming into the office that have to constantly be renewed. So, for example, these could be permission slips that allow you to actually access information for your clients. So we could use the black check mark to say that it is something that applies to this client, but we don't have the most recent information. And then a gray check mark could be something that applies to this client, and we do have the updated copy. Leaving it blank could mean that it doesn't apply to this client. When it comes time to reissue a newer version, we could then just click it until we get back to the black check mark. So once again, we now know that we don't have the most recent copy for this particular client. And that's one example of how you could utilize these, but we do suggest that you talk about them in your office amongst yourselves and figure out how they may benefit you in case this example is not relevant to what you're doing. So that is the first half of business clients. It allows you to see that there is a wide variety of different notes and informational sections that you can utilize to make sure that you have the appropriate information on your client files. The next thing we then look at is the task tabs in each client's file, which all of them except for bookkeeping and custom have predetermined options that you can utilize to simply just come in here, tell it these are the things we want to schedule, and it will place it on the client's files for the appropriate deadlines. It will schedule everything as if it is the beginning of the season, however, so you'll want to close anything you've currently completed for the client, and then the New Year scheduler, which will come up at the end of the calendar year, and it'll ask you if you'd like to move to the next season. What that will do is it will archive anything that is closed or completed from this current year, and then it will automatically reschedule everything for the appropriate dates of the next year for all of your clients. So you only ever have to come into the program and schedule them the first time. So you'll want to go into each of these tabs and tell it what the deadlines are that you'll take care of. And we're just going to remove a little example here from later on. So if we look at all these tabs, you'll see there's a wide variety of different things that you can schedule. Now with your bookkeeping and custom tabs, they are actually set up physically by you. So you will notice that by default there is nothing to schedule in either of these tabs. Bookkeeping is something that is set up by you because it is a different thing that is done for every different office with the term bookkeeping. So there wasn't anything standard that we could place in the system. What you want to do to set up your schemes that you can then schedule to your clients later, you want to go to the green button above the list here on the left-hand side. And when you click it, it will give you your scheduling creator here. So this is basically where I'm going to create my scheme. So we're going to go and give the scheme a name that applies to what we're doing. Now it could be quarterly invoicing, it could be annual renewal, it could be monthly bookkeeping. Whatever you want to call it, give it a name that is appropriate for the work you're doing. If you'd like them numbered in order 1 through however many there are, click the checkbox below and it will number them accordingly. You'll then want to tell it, when does this thing occur? So does this happen every day? Is it bi-monthly, weekly, quarterly, semi-monthly? And you'll see the date options below will change to make sure that you're scheduling the right things. So if we, for example, want to set up something that is monthly, we want it once each month, starting in which month of the year, due on what day of each month. And just so you know, if you choose the 31st, it'll use the last day of whatever each month happens to have. Don't worry about the repeat by field. It had meaning at one point, but it no longer takes effect. And we always stress this, don't assign the template to any of your users in the system, because if you do, then it means that any client you give this to will automatically go to that user's calendar, which you may not want. Then the estimated time tells the program when any task gets scheduled in your system, it gets placed on a task calendar, and it needs to know how much time by default it should take up. So this is telling it, when we schedule this kind of thing, this is generally how long it takes me to complete it. It's always listed by default as an hour. You can change that to whatever you prefer except for 00. This last little checkbox tells the New Year wizard, when we move forward to the next year, are we going to reschedule this as part of everything else? By default, that is on as a yes, but you can take it out so that it only schedules it for the year that you physically place it on the client's file. Meaning, if you want this rescheduled next year, you'll have to manually schedule it again on the next season. So just be careful with that. Now to finally create the scheme, what we're going to do is we're going to click Add Tasks here to create the scheme on the right-hand side. The period end columns are irrelevant here, so don't really worry about those. What you want to focus on is the descriptions and the dates of each of these, and make sure they are what you want them to be. Once you've had a chance to confirm all this, you'll then want to go to the Save option and save the task as a name that you can recognize. We suggest that you save it as the same name as what you gave the task itself. It's not necessary that you do so, but we find that it is best practice to do so. Once you click Save, it'll confirm that this has been done, and then you can click OK on your confirmation. After you've clicked OK, you can simply just cancel out of your creator, and the custom scheme will now appear in the list on the left-hand side. It has not yet been scheduled to any of your clients, but you can now go to any client's file, highlight the one that you want to schedule, and then click Assign here at the bottom. It will then ask you one last thing. Would you like to keep the default settings for this particular task type, or would you like to change anything last minute for this one client? Then click OK, and it will place it on their file just like this. Once it's in there, it works like every other task tab in the program. The only real difference is if you've made a mistake and you need to delete what you've scheduled in here. This is the same for both bookkeeping and custom. You want to go to the Manage Task button here at the bottom. And then from here, select the items you no longer require and delete them from here. So you will find that your custom section works exactly the same way with one minor difference. If we go to the top left of the list, there is an option here to add new service, or a single one as well, which is just a one-time thing. So if we click the recurring one, you'll see the creator is the exact same as what we saw in bookkeeping. The only difference between the two is while the custom section exists to create any other kinds of tasks we didn't have a default location for, you can also take those tasks and make them part of any other tab that's currently in the system. So for example, I may want to create something and then place it as part of the Federal tab. So I would choose Federal from here, then I would call it what I want, and I would tell it when it occurs, create the scheme, and save it. When I save it, it will appear in the custom list, but when I actually go and schedule it to the client, now I've told this one to be part of the Sales/Use tab, it'll tell me it's been successfully added to the tab that I chose. If we look in that tab now, we see that the custom task that I've created is now part of the Sales/Use tab. This also means that it's no longer considered just a custom task. It is now actually considered part of this particular section. So this means that if I go to the task list and I tell it to show me a list of everything that's due from this particular section, this will also come up as part of that result because it's considered part of this section. So while it appears in the custom list to schedule, it is considered an actual task of that particular tab type, not just custom anymore. So as I said, the custom task exists to schedule anything that we didn't have a default location for. One other thing that you can leave on client files is the types of different software that you may use for them. And that's below the Scratchpad we looked at earlier under the client software button, which is per client. And you can basically add all the different pieces of software that you may use for your clients and either choose a name from the list here or even type your own. And you can keep individually their usernames, passwords, version numbers, serial numbers, and any other information you want to leave based on that software. Now we're going to look at two final things from business clients before we move into the task portion. The second last thing that we want to look at is you will notice that when you first begin setting up your deadlines, the notify checkboxes on your client files are blank by default. And that is to let you know that you have not set up the notifications for this particular client. It is individual per client that you'll be setting this up. If you'd like to set it up, you'll want to go back to the Client Info tab. And then on the right-hand side, once again below the Scratchpad we looked at earlier, there's a button here labeled Client Options. Now within here there's a variety of different general options and things you can do, including telling the program who should always be responsible for different task types on this client's file. And there is in here a tab labeled Auto Notifications. So you want to tell it which of the notification types do you want to set up. Now if I actually had an email on this client's file, the email would already be filled out, but I'm just going to type in test@testing.ca. So what you want to do is you want to then choose which type of notification does this client prefer to use. So do they prefer email, letter, fax, or phone call? And as a funny note, because we have been asked this enough times, if you choose the phone call option, Clear Biz as a software will not call the client for you, but it will tell you who you should call and what their information is. Once you've made your selection, simply hit finish and it will say, okay, I'm taking care of that for you. And you will then see the notify checkboxes will be filled out for this particular client. That's to let you know it's been set up. Once it's been set up for at least one client in your system, you will then see this window come up here called the Auto Notification Wizard. This will come up for every user that logs into the program before anything else. Now the reason why every user sees this is because generally offices choose one person to be responsible for these particular types of notifications. However, if that user is gone for a couple of days because they're sick or on vacation, the rest of the office still needs to be aware of the different types of notifications that have to be sent out. You can, however, go to the top of the list here and tell it to show you only the notifications that are applicable to you. And then if you're the person sending this out, when you hit send, it's going to confirm if you want to do this or not. When you confirm that you want to do this, it'll use your default email program, and it will fill out the client's email address, the subject, and in most cases it will have the body of the email here that is filled out automatically. So you can make any further adjustments if you wish. The body of the email is based on a template that I'll show you how to modify from the software. So if you want to attach any files or make any last-minute changes, this is where you're going to want to do that because it's your real email program. Now if you'd like to change the templates for the bodies of the notification, you'll want to go to the Tools menu, and in here click on the Edit Task Settings Wizard. Once in here, there are two major tabs. You'll want to click on the one labeled Other Task Options. And then in here, click the big green button, and this will allow you to change the templates for what it says in the body of the email. These templates are a global setting per task type, so they apply to all clients for this kind of task. And that way you can change them to be a little more relevant to your office. Once you've had a chance to save those, there is one other setting you can utilize, which tells the program the amount of business days in advance of the final deadlines that these types are going to be set to go out to your clients. You can see the defaults here are 15 business days, but you can make this whatever you want. So if you leave it as 15 business days, that's more like 19 days in reality because of the amount of weekends that would be within that time period. Now the very last thing we're going to point out about business clients is in the same settings area under the General tab, there is an option here called the in-house due date period, which is once again global per task type in your program. So what this does is it tells the program that when the task deadlines get scheduled onto your task calendars, they're going to be placed there this many business days in advance of the final deadline. So for example, if we take one of these and make it 8 business days, then how this works is if you were to pretend that that type was due on Sunday the 27th, it would actually appear in your calendar on Wednesday the 16th because that is 8 business days prior to that Sunday. This in-house due date setting is considered to be a first line of defense to making sure that you're not missing the work for your clients. But it's certainly not the last. We have 2 other lines of defense that we're now going to show you how to set up. So that is going to bring us directly into the task section, and we're going to look at the task calendar. Now you can access the task section by either clicking View Tasks from the dashboard on the left or the task section's title itself. They both bring you to the same spot, and then we're going to click the calendar here on the left-hand side in the dashboard. Now, as we mentioned earlier, every user has their own task calendar, including the one that has not yet been assigned to anybody. So if this is your calendar and you're looking at it, you have a couple things here and a couple things there, but you also might notice that there are too many things scheduled on a given day. Everything you see here by default is placed here based on the in-house due date in the system. Now what you can do is you can look at your calendar days by clicking them and opening them up, and then you can actually click and drag the work in days that make better sense. So within a matter of a few minutes, you can sort out your entire schedule and make sure that no day is going to be overburdened with too much work. So while the in-house due date gets these things in your calendar for starters, when you start moving things around the calendar, you're now changing what is called the calendar date. So the calendar acts as your secondary line of defense, and your calendar date then becomes one of the most important dates in your system. So to follow up with a third line of defense, we're going to go to the task list, and we're going to show you how to modify the columns to look exactly like what I have listed here. What I've done is I've gone to the View Hide Columns button in the upper left. This is a setting that is done per user. Now I've taken out missing info and problem flags because I can use the More Info tab to take care of that kind of thing, so I find it's irrelevant to have it in the list itself. I've also taken out the defaults of priority rank and client ID because I find that they are commonly not used, so they are also taking up more space that we could use for other things. I've added in the calendar date, and then I've also added in up to the first 7 steps of these 25 items here on the right hand side, and these names are customizable. So this makes my list look like this, and now if we start on the left and work our way across, we can see what makes this the third line of defense. On the very left we have, is it a priority? Yes or no. Simply just click it in there to place the flag, and it places it in there. Beside it we have, are there any notes on it? Which you can do by clicking View Info directly on that task, going to the Notes section and leaving a note. When you do this, the yellow icon will appear. If you click the yellow icon now, it'll bring you directly to the note that you left on there. So you can see there's more information. We also have who is it for, what is it, where is it physically on the calendar, and right beside it is the final deadline. So you always know these are the amount of days you'll have to get the work completed. Also, if you click the calendar date from here, it brings you directly to the calendar that it's assigned to, and it'll flash a color to let you know which one you clicked on. Then we have who is assigned to it, and finally we have these steps which apply to all the tasks in the list to show us where we might be in terms of getting the work completed overall. The only one that can't be renamed is the closed one. Now if you'd like to rename these steps, you can simply click any View Info button on the right hand side. It doesn't matter which one you click. And on the bottom right of the list there is an option here that says Define Status Info, which allows you to change the names. So it might be something like processed, contacted, prepared, emailed, filed, and anything else you want to put in there. With that in mind, once you've had a chance to change those checkboxes, you can then start filling out the status as you complete the work. And this then allows you to, once it's been filled out, click beside it in the same column to get more detail as to who filled it out and when. You can also sort by any of these columns by clicking them once for ascending, twice for descending, and a third click will clear it out. And at its core function, the task list allows you to use the magnifying glass in the upper left labeled Advanced Search, so you can call up a search of anything that's due in your system. So you could say, show me everything for this client that has not been closed for all date range, and it would give you everything that's not finished for this client. Or you could say, show me everything for this client that's assigned to this user that has only the first status completed. So you can actually search by those checkboxes, meaning you can get a very, very particular report out of anything you want from here at any time. Lastly, every list view in the program has an export to Excel, which will export exactly what you have listed in your view here. So that way if you want to make any further modifications to it, you can. Now the final section of this particular video is going to go through personal clients. The first thing we want to point out is that the personal clients have all the same note-taking sections as business clients did. So they too have a More Info tab, and it works the same way. with their own 21 items on the left. They also have the other tab when you edit them with 5 customizable fields and a note section which appears right away on the client's file. And they too have a Scratchpad, but there is a small difference for the Scratchpad. For personal clients, in the program they get separated for each different tax season into a different tax year folder. So because of that, the information left in a Scratchpad is actually not carried forward from one year to another, whereas it is with business clients. So if I leave a note on Bob Barker's 2012 file, then when he gets copied into 2013, that note is only going to be on the 2012 file. If you want information carried forward for personal clients, you'll want to either leave it in the More Info tab or edit their detail and leave it in the Other tab. Those both carry forward for every different year for your personal clients. For business clients, everything carries forward because they're in one continuous folder. Now you can see that the personal clients as well have a wide variety of tabs in here. And these tabs are not to schedule task deadlines, but to say that this is what we need from them each year. So the top deadline, or the top checkbox, allows you to say this is what we want, and then you'll fill out the secondary one when you actually get it each following year. There's also a report here under Personal Tax Reports at the top of the software. And if we click Client Documentation Required, it allows me to print a very easy list of these specific checkboxes to show the client what I need from them. The majority of your work, however, is going to be done in what is called the view list within the Personal Clients dashboard. The first thing you're going to want to do is scroll over to the right-hand side and then take a look at the checkboxes and figure out if they do or do not match the way in which you run tax season. More than likely, by default, these checkboxes do not match the way in which you do your taxes. So what you want to do is click the Define Process Steps button at the top here. It looks like a pair of shoe prints. And from here you can completely customize these checkboxes. So you can swap, delete, modify, and add as many as you require so it matches the way in which you do your tax season. Once you've had a chance to modify these, and then you begin to fill out the checkboxes themselves, you'll see a color here which will darken as you go across to visually show you where are you in terms of completing the taxes this season. Once again, after you fill out one of those checkboxes, if you click beside it in the same column, it'll show you more detail. Now, as a nifty little side note, the default color for those statuses is actually a very vibrant lime green. If you're anything like me and you don't want to stare at a screen full of vibrant lime green, you can change the color particularly to your preference, which is per computer, by going to the very upper right-hand corner, and you'll see there's a little box with a round circle and an eye in the center. This allows you to call up this window so you can change the color particular to your computer's preference. And here's how things pretty much go during this portion of the program. Every single client begins with the status of a waiting client. When they come to see you, generally they don't bring you everything you need right from the start. So your first status switch will probably be on hold, missing info. And then you can use the blue circle in the bottom right to actually list what it is that you're missing. When they do finally bring you everything you need, you'll probably want to switch them to in progress and then fill out that you've received all docs. At which point that date will get recorded right beside it. You can then use the in-house due date to specify what your turnaround time will be. Then you can see that there is a days in progress, which will begin counting the amount of days that the files have been in progress in your office from the day you said you received everything. And it will keep counting until you physically switch the client status to completed. At which point the completion date will be recorded under the completed date column. Lastly, you then have who is overall responsible for this client. So you have lots of really relevant information in here, including at the bottom of the days in progress, there's an average, which if you look at it at the end of your season, your average may tell you you did an average of 15 days. So that means that maybe you had a fantastic season and everything went really well and there were no problems. Or it could be that maybe the average says you did closer to 23 days. So if you sort by the column, you might notice that the first 30 clients took a lot longer than everybody else, which means that it messed up the average for everybody. So that would maybe give you some insight as to work on them first before anybody else next season. Or the average might say that you did closer to 33 days for everybody. It's possible that maybe you had an abundance of new clients come in this year without enough staff to keep up with the new workload. So that number may give you some insight as to possibly getting some temporary people on to accommodate for that next season. And then very lastly, there is a drop down above the list here on the right hand side, which allows you to look back at any previous year you've done in the program. So if you were to switch it to 2012 and then say, show me all clients of the awaiting status, this will tell you in seconds that these are all the people who did not come to see you for last tax season. So then you can get your user on the phone and start calling up those individual clients, so you can then either try to recapture that lost revenue from last year or confirm that they are in fact an inactive client and then get them off your system. So we'd like to thank you for attending the in-depth Part 1 session. If you have any further questions for us, you can always contact us at the support or the toll-free number. Once again, thank you for joining the Part 1 session. We hope that you enjoyed the video and that you have yourselves a wonderful day.